योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। स्तुवे पतञ्जलिं व्यासं शङ्करं च मुनित्रयं कर्तृसूत्रस्य भाष्यस्य क्रमात् विवरणस्य च। Now we are discussing the 24th sutra of the second chapter, Sadhanapada. So, meaning of this sutra is simple. Tasya hetuku avidya. The literal meaning is the cause of that is avidya. That here means samyoga. What is samyoga? Samyoga is association of the seer and the seeing, the subject and object, the one who experiences and what is being experienced. The wrong identification between the experiencer and the experienced. Or, to put in another language, the identification of I, the witness, the subject, with various internal and external experiences. This is samyoga, association. Of course, this subject was discussed earlier. You can find in the earlier sutra, this samyoga comes, see, suswami shaktyoho surupalabdhi hetuhu samyogaha. So, association of the seer and the seen is the means of knowing the true nature of the powers, and at the same time, it is also the cause of this avidya. Now, The avidya is a subject that should be discussed. I shall give in a nutshell what this literally means. When we come across different experiences, by seeing different objects, by hearing different objects, or through any of the 5 senses of perception and mind, when we interact with many external things, or when we deal with our own inner emotions, they are also as important as external objects. We associate ourselves with that particular experience. To give an example, when you see a painful object, immediately that experience of seeing a painful object, it colors the mind. In fact, the mind itself takes the form of that visual object. And the painful nature of that object, the external objects, gives pain to our mind. So mind is immediately affected. So, of course, here, when we talk about mind, in the Patanjali system, it is called buddhi or intellect. The Purusha reflects on the intellect, the buddhi, and the buddhi identifies with these external objects. So through this buddhi association, we ourselves identify with these experiences. When we have to encounter some unpleasant experiences, immediately we identify ourselves as that experiencer who goes through this unpleasant experience. Similarly, when we have some happy experience, we identify ourselves just as that particular experiencer who goes through this happy experience. Yoga tells you the real I, the real you rather, here of course in individual case, my true nature is far beyond this identification. So this identification makes us anxious, happy for some time, unhappy later. On the other hand, if we can keep in our mind the strong conviction that we are actually not something affected by external experiences, then these external experiences will not have a great impact on our mind or our personality. It need not necessarily make us insensitive. That is a very important problem among yoga philosophers in all philosophical discussions, mostly when in many Indian philosophical council discussions, especially when scholars who are familiar with the modern psychology, when they interpret or when they try to discuss one particular sutra on yoga, yogaha chitta vritti nirodha, the first beginning itself it comes. Yoga is nothing but cessation of identification with the modifications of mind. You find chitta vritti nirodha. Cessation means nirodha, stopping. Sometimes called stoppage of our identification with different vrittis, different impressions that emerge in the mind when we interact with different things. So sometimes there's a strong criticism from many quarters. This is very important to understand this point. The yoga is the killing or dissolving of all human sensitivities. It's not the real implication of vritti nirodha. So in any translation, especially in brief translations, we cannot fully explain the whole implication. So the only translation that is possible is cessation of our sense of self with the modifications that arise in our mind when we interact with different experiences. This is the only thing that, this is perhaps a fairly long translation. Many translations are even much more brief, which may sometimes give rise, which may cause many doubts. So sometimes, it could be interpreted, and so they point out this problem. It could be interpreted as total dissolution of our inner sensitivity, our natural sensitivity or understanding of different external experiences. But this is not real meaning of yoga. Yoga is, in fact, going beyond this state of identification and transcending that stage and reaching Kaivalya. It's called liberation. You find the last pada is Kaivalya pada, liberation. And once you reach the liberation, you live in this world, you continue living this world. All these experiences, they continue to arise. You have to go through these experiences. The only difference is the samyoga doesn't take place. We see different things, we encounter different experiences, but we won't be affected by those experiences. So there is no dissolution or killing or deliberate destruction of human sensitivity. Human sensitivity gets sublimated. We become sensitive in a higher spiritual sense. That's a real implication of chitta vritti nirodha. So that's very important to understand for getting the real meaning of the next two sutras. So here the meaning is tasya hetuhu avidya. The cause of this association is avidya. Of course, we talked about association. Association not only with external objects, even your internal feelings and emotions. Sometimes, of course, external experiences, objects, visual or audio objects, will create corresponding internal emotions, internal crises, internal dilemmas and problems. We should be able to transcend even that stage of association. Suppose we feel terribly angry. Anger is not an external object that you see with your eyes, that you can touch with your sense of touch, that you hear with your sense of hearing. It is invisible, but it is very, very, very real. It arises in our mind. What a yogi does is, immediately the yogi takes out his filtering mechanism. What is this filtering mechanism? Lack of association. Samyoga is totally absent. So when the samyoga is totally absent, then what happens? He will be able to dissociate himself with this anger, emotion, or other internal feelings or emotions that arise in our mind. Even when we feel angry, when we feel anxious, immediately, if we can bring into play this particular strong idea, well, I'm not just a being that is swayed by, but is affected by these internal strong emotions. No. I'm something far beyond this. My true nature transcends this kind of association. So here samyoga doesn't take place in external world alone. It is equally active at the internal level. When we feel anxiety, anger, bitterness or anything, we may react. That's again an important thing. Somebody, often this is often misunderstood. Sometimes, so a yogi should sit somewhere with a grim face, without any sensitivity. He will not react to external circumstances. He will react. You cannot find one great spiritual teacher who did not react. A great spiritual teacher doesn't sit somewhere in a corner with a green face without any sensitivity or with any reaction. What happens? He also reacts. But his reaction will not have much of an impact on his own mind. Otherwise, yoga will be totally useless for common people. So reaction is part of human existence. Yogi also reacts. In the Gita, if you read the second chapter from 55th verse to 72nd verse, in 18 verses, there's a long description of who is a yogi. So the Keshwana Sukhesu Vigadaspraha Vidaraga Bhayakroda Siddhi Munirichidi. Like where you find long description of different characteristics of a yogi. Lord Krishna gives a long description, a graphic description of who is a yogi. So there you find a yogi is a person who reacts to external circumstances. He is very sensitive, but his sensitivity and his reaction are of a different order. His reactions do not affect his own mind. He can be very active, but his mind won't be affected. Because even in the midst of his activity, he can remember, well, this activity and these external circumstances towards which he is reacting are of a relative nature. They are not his true nature, they are of a fleeting nature. He understands their transitoriness. This realization of the transitoriness of the external circumstances or his own internal emotions, feelings, anxiety, or whatever it may be, that realization guards him. It saves him from being swayed or being affected by his own reaction. He can react, he'll react, but his own reaction will not affect him. Now, this should be understood because we are discussing the subject of avidya, which we discussed at the very beginning of this particular sutra. So, Vyasa says, what is this avidya? Avidya is viparya jnana vasana. Means that subliminal impressions of wrong knowledge gained in previous births. So, in the traditional commentaries, you often find they take a wide sweep of our existence. They don't just deal with the problems that we encounter in this life. Impressions and modifications that we have gathered in previous life through previous experiences, which are already stored in our mental system, are already working. Because when we experienced something in the past, in this life or previous life, we were not practicing yoga. We may not have understood the meaning of yoga. So whatever we encountered, it had deep impact on our mind. It registered a strong impression in the mind. So that comes into play. And then what happens? That influences our reaction to different experiences in this life also. So what is happening is our intellectual buddhi is completely permeated by this ignorance. Ignorance means what? Ignorance is avidya. And here, how ignorance functions, we have to go back to an earlier sutra that we discussed at the beginning. That is the third sutra of Sadhanapada, where you find avidya is mentioned. So third sutra of Sadhanapada says, avidya asmida raga dvesha abhiniveshaha panchakleshaha. 5 afflictions, obstructions to spiritual life are explained here. Avidya is the cause, the mother of all the problems. Asmida means the egocentric system, the ego, the individuality. And then raga means attachment. Attachment should be understood. Obsessive attachment to things which completely spiritually enslaves us. Because often when I use the word attachment, I have to use a lot of adjectives and long description, because attachment here means kind of obsessive attachment to certain things, persons, which we know are not good for us, still we cannot get out of it. So it's a kind of spiritual, psychological enslavement. That is the meaning of attachment here. And aversion. And clinging to life. These are the 5 kleshas which are mentioned in the 3rd sutra of Sadhanapada. Now, what are these kleshas? Again, we have to understand, we already discussed earlier at the beginning of this session, long sessions, that our mental, psychological life can be analyzed from 2 perspectives. One, the experience, and second, our reaction, our emotional, relational, psychological or physical reactions to that experience. Our whole mental life, according to Patanjali's system, are divided into 2 different categories, broad categories. Bhoga is experience, and Vega or Udvega, which means a reaction, psychological, relational, emotional reactions to experiences. These reactions together are called kleshas. And they are rooted in individuality. Why? I am experiencing this. So, I am the experiencer. I am experiencing this terrible problem. So, as I give this, the stereotype example I give many times earlier, a man getting trapped in a traffic jam, sitting quiet in a good air-conditioned car, by getting worried and getting excited, getting anxious, his BP goes up, his tensions increase, and maybe his diabetes also may be affected. Doing nothing. So his psychological reactions, his volitional, emotional reactions build up, practically devastating his internal equilibrium. So, and these are rooted in the asmita. Asmita means the individuality, the ego system. I am caught in this traffic jam. I will be late for the office and also. A yogi also may be sitting in a car caught in the traffic jam. He also may be anxious to get back to his office, to go to his office, to reach his office on time. But then the only difference is he won't be affected. He may be anxious. He may also try to make a telephone call, how long this traffic problem will continue, how he can get out of it. He may also, but he won't be affected. His mind will be calm and quiet. So you can see an example of one of our Swamis in our order. He was Swami Turiyananda. He was the one who built this Shanti Ashrama. He was the one who started this. So Swamiji was instrumental in that process. He was a great yogi. And he worked here for some years, 2 years. And then he had to go back to India. So now there's an interesting incident. He was traveling in a ship. So there was a big storm, maybe somewhere in the Mediterranean or somewhere, Suez. Anyway, the ship was going through a very turbulent route in the seas. So many people were worried. There was a lot of excitement and people started crying and weeping. But he was not affected. He remained unaffected. He also was a feeling when something could happen. But then, if you give him a lifeboat, he also would have used it if there is an accident. Yogi will not reject a lifeboat. The only thing is, his mind, internal system will not be enslaved, won't be affected, won't be devastated by these external experiences. That's a poise. Why? Because this individuality, the ego system, gets spiritually sublimated. Because there is no avidya. If avidya is absent, the ego system gets sublimated, then there will be no raga, dvesha and abhinivesha. So, and what is this avidya? I will describe this avidya. In yoga system, the avidya has got a very limited meaning. In yoga system, avidya actually means this association of purusha and buddhi. That in pratyachetanasya sabuddhi samyogaha. This association. And this samyoga is actually caused by avidya. But something that causes this samyoga or association of purusha and buddhi, and through that association, the buddhi gets colored by external experiences, which leads to suffering, anxiety, all these problems. So the root cause of all these problems is avidya. Now, how this avidya causes problems? These kleshas. As I said, we have to remember, avidya causes asmita, that individuality based on the idea that I am going through all these experiences and I am this psychophysical mechanism. I am nothing but this part of this prakriti. The complete forgetfulness of the fact that I am the Purusha from yoga point of view, and the forgetfulness of the fact that I am the Atman from the Vedantic point of view. So the total absence of vidya or knowledge is avidya or ignorance. And when you have this avidya, then you will have this other three problems. Asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. So asmita we already explained. Raga means extreme attachment, obsessive attachment. So our reactions, these kleshas, towards external or internal experiences could be in the form of either extreme attachment, obsessive attachment, or its total opposite, extreme aversion, hatred, or just a tendency to avoid, to move away. These are the three types of kleshas that are caused by asmita, which are again caused by avidya, which are rooted in avidya. So this should be understood. One reaction or volitional, psychological reaction, emotional reaction is moving towards something, because raga. Sometimes people get extremely attached to certain things, to human beings, to ideas, to concepts, or to some self-conceived illusions, getting extremely attached. It is one kind of bondage. Or we may become extremely hostile, the opposite of attachment. We become irrationally hostile. That's one thing. Both are two sides of the same coin. Attachment towards something that gives us happiness is like binding our feet with a golden chain. Attachment towards something that gives us problems is like binding our feet with an iron chain. That's all. Even if you are bound by gold chain, you cannot move. So nobody would be happy to be imprisoned in a prison where they use golden chains to bind you. So both have the same effect of total being in a state of bondage. The third stage is, moving away. That is abhinivesha. Abhinivesha means clinging to life. Of course, this is one of the wonders, according to Vedanta, according to Mahabharata. One of the great mysteries and wonders of the world is every day you see people dying. So even a person who manufactures coffin, he need not tell him that people are dying every day. or people working in crematorium, the paid staff, they also know. But then they also forget every day that they are going to live once for all, eternally. Of course, they may know intellectually, but in their actions and thought currents, sometimes there is this creeping feeling that they won't die. So, this is called abhinivesha, clinging to life. Now, these are 5 kleshas or 5 obstructions which are natural in spiritual life. This is a unique contribution of Patanjali. Patanjali's analysis of our psychological, mental life, mental world into 5 categories. So the definition of klesha itself has a great psychological meaning. It's called one of the commentaries in Mani called Mani Prabha. See, it says, Klishyendi karma tat phala pravartadas shantaha, means purusham dukhanuvruvanti kleshaha. What are kleshas? Now, kleshas are nothing but the fruition of karmas that we have done in the past. So you can easily see, if any person displays a strong obsessive hatred towards something, or aversion towards something else, or a tendency to avoid certain things, you can find modern psychologists will tell you certain phobias, certain problems are related to experiences of the patient that he had to go through during his formation years, childhood days, or early part of his life, which again develop into strong obsessive phobias or anxieties. Many problems of split personality, or schizophrenic problems, multiple personalities. All these are sometimes explained in terms of strong impressions and memories that remain at the subconscious level, which indirectly influence our thought currents, impressions, and the way we react to certain circumstances and personalities. That is fully accepted in yoga. The only difference is yoga extends this beyond the childhood days or memory formation days. It takes us beyond this life. So how do you explain certain habits and impressions, certain attitudes which cannot be explained in the light of experiences in this life? So yoga says, yoga and Vedanta both, they say we have to look beyond the present lifespan. That's what it means. Now, what Patanjali says is that this avidya should be removed, because avidya is a hetu, tasya hetuhu avidya. The samyogasya hetuhu avidya. This means the cause of this samyoga association is avidya. Now, what is this avidya? So you have to remember, avidya is a very important term used in Indian philosophy, especially in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. In the Patanjali system, it just got a very limited meaning. It is nothing but, this viparya jnana vasana. Means the impressions of previous life experiences or early experiences of this life, which remain accumulated in the mental system. They remain accumulated in the mental system because of avidya. Because of avidya. Avidya means what? Avidya means our forgetfulness of the fact that we are in reality the conscious Purusha, which is free from all ignorance, which by its very nature of the nature of consciousness, blissfulness, or knowledge. And then when we forget our true nature, we also identify ourselves with something that we really are not. We identify ourselves with Prakriti. And when we identify ourselves with Prakriti, we identify ourselves with buddhi, because buddhi or intellect, mind, our senses of perception, senses of action, these are all evolutes of Prakriti. So once we forget that we are the Purusha, the conscious reality, we start associating ourselves, evolving a wrong impression that we are actually an aspect of Prakriti. And then the slightest physical problem, the slightest emotional problem, the slightest mental problem will have a devastating effect in our life. So the solution to the problem is to remove avidya. And avidya can be removed only through Kaivalya. Kaivalya is discussed elaborately in the 4th chapter. It's called Kaivalya Pada. So this is the point, remember. To understand avidya in its broader perspective, we have to refer to one important statement that comes in the famous commentary by Vijnana Bhikshu. So Vijnana Bhikshu speaks of a person who has transcended avidya. He says, for a Jivan Mukta, even after cessation of avidya, even after he has transcended avidya or ignorance, his characteristics, his gunas, all will continue functioning. That means he will continue experiencing different external or internal experiences. But he is convinced that he is the real Purusha, so it won't affect him. That's the meaning. Na avidya guna purusha samyoga samannvaye hetuhu. That's the meaning. Kintu yadhokta gunadhikari. So he makes a statement that is the connection, the association, the identification between our sense of what we are with the changing external or internal experiences, that connection is broken. So you can live in the world, there's no problem. Even in our daily life, even if we don't become yogis or when we don't become liberated souls, this has got a practical benefit in our daily life. One point is this, one simple solution. You find Swami Sivanandaji. Sivanandaji was a great yogi. He was the founder of Divine Life Society. One of his lectures, as an answer to a question, he referred to this. So what is the benefit of practicing this yoga? Because he was talking, because he used to sometimes talk about the need to transcend, to go beyond the Hatha Yoga, beyond the physical aspects of yoga. So the point is, if we can form at least an intellectual conviction that we are not these changing psychophysical phenomena, our personality has got a higher transcendental dimension that goes beyond the physical, beyond the emotional. Even the intellectual conviction can give, at the beginning at least, some kind of temporary assistance in our day-to-day life, in confronting the problems, the realities of day-to-day life. So conviction at the very beginning. Yoga aims to take us to culture beyond conviction. Because conviction is superficial. Conviction may not always be very helpful, but that's the beginning of study. Intellectually, we try to understand and we try to recollect. But once we go beyond that stage, once we really start believing in the fact that we are not just part of this dead Prakriti, the inert Prakriti, this material, phenomenal universe, we have got a higher transcendental, empirical, spiritual dimension. Once this conviction goes deeper, it can become a culture, it can become an attitude in our life. So that is the advantage. So that's why, Vijnana Bhikshu says, Jivanmukta also lives in this world. He also experiences the multiplicity of different external experiences, internal experiences, but he remembers that he is the Purusha. So that helps him to remain in a state of perfect poise and steadiness. Now, to understand this, the limited meaning in which the word avidya is used in Patanjali's system, we should understand its higher dimension in Vedanta. In Vedanta, avidya or ajnana means avidya or ignorance. It has got a very well-defined meaning. At the individual sense, we forget our true nature, and in its place, we superimpose something else that we are not. We forget that we are the Atman, and that is called a kind of concealment, which is called avarana. And then what happens? We superimpose in its place something that we really are not. We think we are this body, we are this mind, we are this intellect. So this is called adhyaropa. So, or adhyasa is kind of superimposition. This superimposition makes us emotionally vulnerable. That's the implication of Vedanta. Now in the next 25th sutra is also very important. Tad abhavat samyoga bhavo hanam tadrishe kaivalyam. So, the absence of this avidya, when we are free from this avidya, which causes association or samyoga, which again causes all these kleshas in the form of extreme obsessive attachment to certain things, extreme obsessive hatred to certain things, and a tendency to move away certain things in a very irrational way. So it's called raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. All human attitudes can be explained under these three categories. One is raga, as I said, extreme obsessive attachment to certain things which actually enslave us spiritually and psychologically. Even when we want to get out of certain things, one part of the mental system gets extremely attached to certain things. That is raga. So raga has got a special implication in yoga and Vedanta. It is not, you may like ice cream, that is not raga. Or you may like to travel, you may like a good job, that's not raga. Raga is something that binds you. One part of your system, your mental system, knows it is not good and wants to get out of it. But the other part of the mental system gets attached to it in a very obsessive way. That is called raga. If it is just likes or dislikes, the way we understand its empirical everyday life, it has no connection with previous life or previous life experiences. It is very superficial. If you like certain food and if the doctor tells you it may cause diabetes, you may stop it tomorrow. It is not raga. But then something that you are attached to in a very obsessive way, almost a kind of spiritual slavery. And also you have a desire to get out of it, but you are not able to get out of it. Often, in spiritual life, two types of obstacles are mentioned in the scriptures, Shankaracharya says. One is a tendency to postpone, equal procrastination. Second problem is our mind creating false justifications to avoid doing good deeds or practicing spiritual sadhana, because one part of our mind doesn't like it, want it. So it detaches itself from the main mental system, and it creates a kind of conspiracy. In many modern psychological books you find your own mind enters into conspiracy against your own success, Dr. says. This is what Shankaracharya says. So you can write somebody writing in 8th century anticipating what modern psychologists are telling. Your own system as if conspiring against your own success. It's really not happening. That's one way of analyzing the functioning of the subtle functions of human mind. So it appears to be so. But you don't really want to admit, well, I will not practice, or I will not do this good thing. I will do the other thing. You want to say, we try to find a justification for not doing the right thing, or some kind of temporary justification for doing the wrong thing. That's one form. The other one is procrastination. It could sometimes become pathological, or postponement. This is one example of raga. When we are attached to certain things, we are convinced that it's not right to do that. So we have a slight desire to get out of it. But then this raga is there. So our own mind finds a justification, a false justification for doing that. So this is one thing. The same mechanism functions in dvesha. Irrational hatred, some kind of phobias are based on this. Irrational hatred, dvesha. That's why Patanjali had to extend his world of analysis beyond this life. So he says, many of these kleshas are based on impressions. They're built upon impressions that come from not this life, but some distant life. You may have done something maybe in 1st century AD, and so in a way. So it could happen. So raga and dvesha, extreme hostility, which we know to be fully irrational, but then we are not able to get out of it. So the same mechanism working in the opposite direction is raga. The other is dvesha. Both are two sides of the same coin. Abhinivesha is also a kind of mechanism very similar to this. Trying to avoid, moving away from. So that is natural, that is built in. Only a very wise person can welcome death with the red carpet treatment. Nobody will do that. Death is a very scary thing for every normal human beings. I'm not talking about suicidal tendency. I'm talking about the way, Socrates could refuse, the offer made by Clytus, given the previous day, last time I will get you out of it, but he was not bothered. It's a classic example. He was a kind of a Jivan Mukta. Maybe ancient Greeks did not have a vocabulary to explain him, or a culture to appreciate him, so they didn't really call him a liberated soul. But Vedanta would consider him as a liberated soul, Jivan Mukta, because he had a higher dimension in his mind of his own individuality, going beyond the physical, beyond the psychological, beyond the mental. So, clinging to life, in spite of the full conviction that one may live for 100 years or 120 years, but not beyond that, still the tendency to cling to life. So these are three natural mental mechanisms which function as obstructions in spiritual life. Because these three mechanisms, these three obstructions could take different forms and different shapes, they may take different methods in our spiritual evolution. So Patanjali is giving a very interesting analysis, and the commentators gave a much more graphic description of how it actually functions in our mental life. So we will have interaction now for some time. So we can have discussion for 10 minutes. Okay.
Sankhya is a dualistic system. I mean, there is Purusha and Prakriti. So then, when we talk about the separation of the recognition of this, identifying the Purusha or the Atman with the Buddhi, I mean, Buddhi, in Vedantic sense, is a temporary entity. I mean, so Buddhi is sort of a reflection of Buddhi is sort of a reflection of the Purusha or the Atman.
Purusha reflects in Buddhi. Buddhi itself is an evolute of Prakriti, the inner Prakriti. So in that inner Prakriti, Purusha reflects. Then only the Buddhi is able to understand things, think of things, and then only the whole process of false association begins. So the association first takes place in the form of Purusha's reflection on Prakriti as a whole inert, and then in all the 23 evolutes of Prakriti. The first evolute is Buddhi or Mahat, it's called Buddhi, the first evolute. And under the Buddhi, there are Ahankaras. Ahankaras got 3 dimensions, Sattvika, Rajasiga and Tamasiga. And under these 3 categories, the mind, the 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and then from Tamasiga Ahankara, the 5 Tanmatras. Tanmatras are the subtle elements of, this space, fire principle, water principle, earth principle, and so on. And then under that, the visible, the phenomena, the gross Mahabhutas, the empirical world, Pancha Mahabhutas, which constitute the empirical world. So, Buddhi, the difference between Buddhi and the empirical world is one of degrees, not of kind. Our mind or intellect, in the yoga system, in Sankhya system, and also in Vedanta system, are not very different from the inner universe. The only point is, the Atman reflects in Buddhi or mind, but Atman doesn't reflect in the empirical things. That's the only difference.
You're talking about with Swami Shivananda about this practical benefit of having this.
Once he makes a statement like that, in a question answer, he makes a statement. Even if you read this, even if an idea, if one can keep in mind, it helps. You find these ideas in the complete works of Vivekananda also you find.
Right. My question with that is, I can see if you can really believe that, definitely that could be a real practical benefit to your life. But on the other hand, say as a Westerner, we're trained in the scientific method, to doubt. So how do we know it's not another form of raga or intellectual attachment? Unless you have the direct.
Many great, there being many wonderful disciples of Shivanandaji, good Westerners, or his disciples. There were very many who, you can just imagine what transformation was brought in the lives of the Beatles when they met Mahesh Yogi. Was perhaps cannot be compared to Shivanandaji in a way, actually. So, very often, many great thinkers, when they felt a need for something higher, depending upon the intensity of their feeling of a need for transcending higher. And with that feeling, when they approach yoga, they found an answer. At that stage, you do not rationalize much. See, if you go to a library and if you read a book on yoga, just as you read the Origin of Species, you may practically look at any spiritual book from the same perspective. It's natural. But when due to your samskaras or impressions accumulated in previous life or in this life, you feel a strong desire to go something beyond empirical. And then you feel, you find that there is something higher than reason. See, emotions do not listen to reason. When you really feel a strong need, an emotional need for some higher spiritual principle, and if your mind tries to rationalize, your emotions won't listen to your mind. Our intellect, reasoning faculties drag you backward only when our strong desire for going spiritual life is not very strong. So fundamentally, in Vedanta we call adhikari, means when you reach a very high level. That's why Shankaracharya gives, there are 4 important qualifications for a very spiritual seeker. One is, you should have a strong sense of discerning mind between what is real, what is unreal. Nitya, anitya, vastu viveka. So, if we go to spiritual life, thinking that spiritual life is real and material world also is real, both are equally wonderful, then we may use our reason, and we may understand some aspects of spirituality, but then if we do not recognize the fact that there is something eternal, really real with capital letter R, which is beyond empirical things, we won't really get the conviction. And when you reach that level of conviction, then you also realize the need to renounce, to give up your lower levels of things, So it is called, ikamutra phalabhoga viraga. It means a kind of absolute renunciation for things of this world or higher things. And when this second stage reaches, naturally, your mind will develop certain faculties. For example, your mind will develop a more sublime kind of concentration for higher things. If you go to a library, there are wonderful newspapers, internet, flashy, glassy newspapers, and also there are some great spiritual books. You may go and read the spiritual books. Otherwise, you won't look at them. So you are left behind one stage. Of course, this may not happen all of a sudden, but through gradual evolution, which may perhaps extend over maybe spread over several lives sometimes, One may develop this quality, samadhi sakka sampatti it is called, It means internal control, self-restraint, external control, and concentration, all these great qualities. And after when you have reached the third stage, then there is one inevitable experience that is bound to come. You know that? That is a strong desire for liberation. That is mumukshutvam. So Shankaracharya says, to become fully fit for the highest spiritual experience, even to begin this evolution in spiritual life, one should have these 4 qualifications. One may not reach the highest degree of perfection in all these qualities, all of a sudden, or even in one life. But we have all reached some level of perfection. Otherwise, we cannot intellectually even listen to this. There is nothing glamorous in reading Patanjali Yoga Sutra. There is nothing entertaining about it that will keep you to this place. So, how can you listen to these great ideas which are not very entertaining? And mind you, there is nothing very wonderful or glamorous about it. How can you sit for 1 hour listening to these ideas? Because you have reached some degree of perfection in acquiring any or some of these great 4 qualifications. So mumukshutvam is the last one, strong desire for liberation. So even in acquiring This is called sadhana chatushtayam, it is called, 4 fundamental qualifications. Even in acquiring this, we may have reached different levels of progress and growth. So, once you reach that level, then you will understand, because true reasoning will tell you there is a limit to reason. True logic will tell you that there is a limit to logic. If a scientist tells you the science has explained everything in this world, he's not a scientist. If Einstein had believed that, he would not have become an Einstein after all. See, all great scientists had doubts. But the doubt of a spiritual seeker is like a line in straight line progression. It takes them beyond doubt. But doubt of those who are not inclined to spiritual life is like a cycle that goes on rotating without coming out of it. So, you're talking with the... See, one American gentleman heard about Ramana Maharshi and read something about him, and he left America and went straight to Tiruvannamalai. And he said, no, what happened? Do you think he was totally uneducated? He was totally irrational? Though the feeling he had, the sense of the quest for higher spiritual truth was far beyond any reason could hold him back. So true reason will understand its limitations. True logic will take you beyond itself. True reasoning will take you beyond itself. That's the difference between intellectual arrogance and genuine reasoning faculty. So all these spiritual seekers had it.
Do we have to have faith, or is that not really?
Faith, yeah, again, faith is, that word has a very bad connotation, because of its association for centuries, associated, faith and free will as if they are both mutually contradictory. But true faith is not opposed to reason. True faith is not opposed to reason. So, okay, so thank you. So, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Namaste.